Unless you've been living in a hole your entire life, you know that Lewis and Clark traversed the country from St. Louis, Missouri to the mouth of the Columbia River near the present-day town of Astoria. One of the most famous moments in the expedition was when they stood overlooking the Pacific on what is now the Washington coast and voted on where they would spend the winter. The journals record this vote, and they also indicate that Lewis and Clark allowed a slave and an Indian woman to vote. The only problem is, they made the wrong choice. When you're picking a place to winter, you want abundant food, decent weather, easy canoe transportation, and relatively flat land. Lewis and Clark should have stayed right around the mouth of the Sandy River. Here, if they depended on killing deer and elk, they could have had all the meat they wanted. At Fort Clatsop, the elk all moved to the mountains in the spring, forcing the expedition to return before they were ready. At the mouth of the Sandy River, they would have had much better weather than they had at the mouth of the Columbia, where they complained incessantly about the rain, sometimes claimed that they were in fear of their lives from the rain and wind. The message is simple. Business ain't a democracy. Companies are dictatorships. Get used to it. If you're a leader, lead. If you're a manager, manage. Don't wimp out by asking your people to vote. As the management guru Tom Peters might say, voting stinks. If you run a company, nobody's vote should count but yours. That's why so many great CEOs of American companies pack their boards of directors with their pals who will go along with whatever they want. A leader is like a guy who climbs a tall mountain to get a better view of the surrounding territory. Once he gets a view of the direction the company must take, his job is clear. He must descend, like Moses, from the mountain and communicate his vision to others. Take, for example, the financial geniuses that ran a hedge fund called Long-Term Capital Management. These people had a new vision of the financial future, and they used that vision to make millions of dollars for their clients for about 3 years. Then, due to no fault of their own, their vision failed, and the company lost hundreds of millions of dollars. These days, people who talk about corporate governance seem to want to remove the majesty from leadership. Lewis and Clark would never have agreed, and I can illustrate this with some statistics on the way they set up Fort Clatsop. Now, their party numbered about 33 people. If you look at this diagram, you can see that there are 3 rooms on the left side of the fort. 28 people lived in those 3 rooms. And believe me, I've been in them. They're very cramped. Lewis and Clark, on the other hand, by themselves, got the 2 center rooms on the right side of the fort. Now, this gives you some sense of what they thought about the majesty of office. When you have scarce resources, very little room, the leaders get most of it. When you have scarce resources in a company, the leaders should get most of it. The historian Stephen Ambrose, who wrote Undaunted Courage, says that rank meant little in this expedition, that they were kind of a band of brothers. Don't make me laugh. Just look at the way they laid out their living quarters. A lot of modern management gurus say that the boss should avoid large offices, private jets, and other perks because they separate him from the rest of the employees and they can create resentment. However, the best managers at top companies like American Airlines and Global Crossings know this is nonsense. Even when they're laying off workers and cutting their pensions, they maintain lavish lifestyles and retirement packages at the company's expense. Dennis Kozlowski once spent $2 million of his company's money on his wife's birthday party, as well as millions on his own art collection. A Roman emperor would be proud. Lewis and Clark got most of their food and supplies for the expedition from Indians they met along the way. They traded trinkets with these Indians for the necessities of life, so you might say they were dependent on the Indians for survival. In the same way, modern businesses are dependent on customers, investors, suppliers, citizens groups, and others who have a stake in the company. We call these groups stakeholders. Many modern management gurus talk about the need to understand and respect stakeholders like customers and investors. Lewis and Clark's insightful and wise observations of the Indian tribes on whom they were dependent showed them to be great leaders. November 4th, 1805, several canoes of Indians from the village above came down. Those fellows we found assuming and disagreeable. However, we smoked with them and treated them with every attention and friendship. During the time we were at dinner, one of those fellows stole my pipe tomahawk, which they were smoking with. I immediately searched every man in the canoes, but could find nothing of my tomahawk. While searching, one of those fellows stole a coat. November 21st, 1805. These people appear to view sensuality as a necessary evil and do not appear to abhor it as a crime in the unmarried state. The young females are fond of the attentions of our men and appear to meet sincere approbation of their friends and connections for thus obtaining favors. The women of the Chinook nation have handsome faces, low and badly made, with large legs and thighs which are generally swelled from the stoppage of circulation in the feet by many strands of beads.